HaBRIT. Why does the spiritual level of each generation decrease over time? It's part of that to get us to this point in which it does not even make sense to many religious people to follow the Torah and the Chachamim. Is this the ultimate test? The world that HaShem created has certain rules instilled in it. Now, Derech Eretz Kadma Torah. The ways of the world came before the Torah itself. That's how the Mishnah goes. So the rules of the world were instilled into the world before Hashem officially gave the Torah to the world. Even though He wrote the Torah 974 generations before He created the world, according to Gemara Masechet Chagigah, still He didn't give us the Torah right away. We waited a long time before He gave us the Torah. Now, this was in the year 2448 from creation. So now, as far as the 2848, something like that. Now the rules of the world didn't have to wait for the Torah to come. We already knew there's certain rules of the world. Gravity was in the world. The certain things when it comes to air, certain things in nature itself, photosynthesis, and so on and so forth. All of those things came into the world. One of the rules in the world is that the deterioration of the generations. Why? Because the further you go from the source, the more you're playing telephone, the more there's a risk. And this is in essence just simply nature. That you could understand. If, let's say, for example, you have a game of telephone, you have 10 people, okay? One guy starts with a secret, and he says, tell him that I went to the bank. The next guy says, tell him to go to the bank. The next guy says, tell him about a bank. Next guy says, go rob a bank. Next guy says, he's a murderer. Next guy says, he's a killer. By the time it gets to the 10th person, you have a completely different sentence. Why? There's more problems. Now, our Torah, Baruch Hashem, our Torah is the same Torah that we got from Mount Sinai. But the level of dedication for the Torah has deteriorated drastically. Hence the reason of why people do not have as much honor to the Chachamim. Now, when it comes to honoring the Chachamim, the problem that most people have is that it's not that they are learned and therefore they disrespect the Chachamim, is that they're arrogant and therefore they disrespect the Chachamim. Disrespect to the sages, disrespect to the Torah, does not come from knowledge. It comes from ignorance combined with arrogance. That's where it comes by from. The Gemara in Yerushalmi, Masechet Shabbat, in Perek Aleph, Halacha number 2, one of the Amoraim by name of Gidol says, anytime you are going to make a statement in the name of one of the Chachamim, any Chacham of your generation, of previous generations, you must visualize and picture this sage that you're mentioning his name, this rabbi that you're mentioning his name, even if he's your local rabbi, and you're mentioning what he said to one of your friends or fellows, you have to imagine as if he's standing right next to you. Why? Because if he was standing right next to you, you'd act probably differently than if he's standing not next to you. Khatam Sofer, a few hundred years ago, the Khatam Sofer was one of the Gdolei Ador, just a few hundred years ago, which, as a side note, he was one of the ones that was very much against wigs, even during those days when wigs looked like broomstick heads. The Khatam Sofer got to a point when he would learn Gemara, he would say certain sages' names. For example, one of the sages' names that's most common in the Gemara is Abaye. So when he would say Amar Abaye, which means Abaye said, following, he would say Amar Abaye, Baruch haba Abaye. He says, welcome Abaye. He would actually see the neshama of Abaye, of the sage Abaye. He would see the neshama of Abaye. When he would mention something in his name, then he say Rabbi Yehuda, he would see it, he would feel it. The point being is that you don't get to that just because you're bored and you read some books. You get that because you enjoy their words, you mesmerize in their words, you love their words, you just want to feel everything that they said and do everything that they said because you respect them. When a person does not respect the Chachamim, it's simply because he's ignorant about them. For example, one of the Chachamim that we have is from previous generations is Rabbi Chaim Palachi. Rabbi Chaim Palachi, in one of his books, he writes in the beginning of the book of how he just dealt with a enormous tragedy where it was a fire, and in that fire it burned tens of thousands of answers, halachic answers that he wrote for questions that people asked, and 54 of his books that there was only one copy of. 54 of his books there was only one copy of, that he wrote. Tragedy, to say the least. We're not talking about books that were, 3 pages. My name is Rabbi, and we're talking about serious books. Each book with a lot of serious dedication. Now, an average person today that goes through such a tragedy most likely will commit suicide. To lose your entire life's work in a fire, it's very, very horrible. But what did Rabbi Chaim Palachi do? He lived from that fire, he lived another 27 years. And during those 27 years, he didn't have much of his work left, that he wrote from the first 3/4 of his life, or 2/3 of his life. He didn't have much of it left. He had a little bit left. So what did he do? He wrote another 73 books, covering practically all facets of the Torah. The commentary on the entire Gemara, commentary on the entire Shulchan Aruch, commentary on the entire Chumash, commentary on the entire Tanakh, commentary on the Zohar, commentary on all he covered everything. Literally, when you write a Teshuva, you write an answer halachically, and you're bringing sources. If you don't bring Rabbi Chaim Palachi, some Talmidei Chachamim going to frown upon it. It's like, how did you not bring him? He's everywhere. How did you avoid bringing him into your answer? It's like not bringing a Rambam. Like, how do you not bring him? He talked about everything. So now, why did I mention this? The fact that he already wrote 50 books, 54 books is extraordinary. And, this is the ones that got burned. But put that aside. He wrote 73 books in 27 years. That means every 3 months he finished a whole book. Not to read a whole book, to write a whole book. So much so that they said to his son, surely your father, he used Kabbalah Ma'asit, special type of Kabbalah for the kuntres, for the pen that's made from a feather, for the kuntres to write for him. Because how did he write that fast? Forget about how much knowledge he had. Everybody knows he was a genius, but how did he write that fast? A whole book every 3 months for the rest of his life. When a person disregards Rabbi Chaim Palachi and what he says, would you say that person is a normal person? No, he's either a crazy person, an ignorant person, he doesn't know what he's dealing with, or he's an arrogant person. He's so arrogant that he cannot see anything other than himself. Such a person is spiritually sick. He's spiritually sick. And the problem is there's a lot of that. And guess what? Who was bigger, Rabbi Chaim Palachi or the Rambam? Surely the Rambam. Rambam precedes him by many, many years, hundreds of years. 800 years ago is the Rambam. Almost 900 years ago is the Rambam. Moshe ad Moshe lo haya ke Moshe. From Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu until Moshe ben Maimon, there was nobody like Moshe. The Rambam, people disregard him whenever they feel like it. Even though no one in their right mind would go against Rabbi Chaim Palachi. Or you go with Rabbi Ovadia. Rabbi Ovadia wrote dozens of books. If you simply just are able to go through any one of his books without being enamored at how smart he was, how much of a genius, he must have had every bit of his brain used. It was unbelievable how he thought about everything and knew everything in his head, remembering 60, 70,000 books by heart, to the extent where there were certain places in the Middle East where the Arabs had control of a lot of old books and they wouldn't let the Jews take them. He would go to their libraries, look at the book one time, come back home and write the whole book. That's the type of brain that he had. That's the type of neshama that he had. And somebody today dares to disagree with one of the things that he wrote. Is this person normal? Or is he an ignorant? Or is he arrogant? So that's the thing. When people go against the Torah, they're not going against the Torah or the Chachamim because of knowledge. They're going against them because of bad character traits. Typically, it all stems from arrogance. And that's why actually the Gemara in Masechet Avodah Zarah, page 19b, the Gemara in Masechet Avodah Zarah, page 19b, talks about it, where it says, Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Ravuna, Amar Rav. Rabbi Abba said in the name of Ravuna, who said in the name of Rav. What is the meaning in what's written in Proverbs 7:26? Ki rabim chaleli mipila. For many victims has she fled. What does this verse mean? So Chachamim say, this means Zeh talmid shelo egia leorah umorah. This is a Torah student who has not reached the level of maturity to decide the law, to decide what's really the halacha, what's right, what's left, and yet he decides it nonetheless. And also, v'atzumim kol harugea, and the mighty are all she has slain. This is referring to a talmid she'egia leorah v'onam orah. This is referring to a Torah student who has reached a level of maturity to decide the law. He has the knowledge, but yet he stays quiet, he doesn't say anything. So that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says that somebody that doesn't know enough, but he decides that he knows the law. He decides he knows everything, he goes against the big rabbis and so on. Says this person is creating a damage. What kind of damage? So the Gemara is 1600 years ago. We need some commentary on this. Where do we go? You can't go anywhere without going to the Rambam. So you go to the Rambam. Ilchot Talmud Torah. The Rambam Ilchot Talmud Torah, chapter 5, halacha number 4. It says the following. And he uses this particular Gemara, this particular Proverb 7:26. He says, V'kol talmid shelo egia leorah umorah, arei ze rasha shoteh v'gas ruach. Any student who is not worthy of rendering halachic judgments and does so anyway, which is what the Gemara was just talking about. Somebody doesn't know enough, but he decides that, no, I disagree with Rav Moshe Feinstein. I disagree with Rav Ovadia. I disagree with the Rambam. I disagree with Rabbi Chaim Parlachi. I disagree with all these big sages. I know better. I decide if it's allowed, not allowed. I decide. He decides he doesn't know anything, but he decides. And we're not talking about somebody who doesn't know anything, he doesn't know Aleph Bet. We're talking about he's not mature enough to paskin. Why? He doesn't know yet. He hasn't covered the whole Shas many times. He's not considered somebody that's a Talmid Chacham yet. He just read a few books and watched some YouTube videos. That's it. And he thinks that he can decide whatever he wants. His rabbi didn't give him the authority to do such a thing. He doesn't have the knowledge to do such a thing. The Rambam writes, he elaborates on this Gemara. He writes clarity here. He says, any student who is not worthy of rendering halachic judgments and does so anyway is foolish, wicked, and arrogant. As it says in Proverbs 7:26, she cast down many corpses. It applies to him. On the other hand, a sage, someone that is a Talmid Chacham, who is worthy of rendering halachic judgments and refrains from doing so, holds back the spread of Torah and places stumbling blocks before the blind. And the verse, that same verse, second half, applies to him. How prodigious are those that she slew. It applies to him. Someone that has the knowledge, but he wants to keep his mouth shut because he doesn't want to debate people, he doesn't want to say anything, he doesn't want people to disagree with him. No, if you have the knowledge, you have to say it. You have to spread the Torah. But then the Rambam goes back to the original Rasha, this arrogant person that thinks he can just disagree with all the Chachamim. No, it's only rabbinical. No, it's only the Amoraim that said it. Like some of these jokesters that you have in the world today, that they simply dismiss the sages, the Rishonim, the Achronim, the Gemara, and so on. They just dismiss rabbis, like, it's just rabbis. The Rambam continues, Alacha, meaning, in Shamayim, this is what they think. These underdeveloped students, he's talking about these same Reshaim, these same arrogant people, these same foolish people, who have not gathered much Torah knowledge, seek to gain prestige in the eyes of the common people and the inhabitants of their city by jumping to sit at the head of all questions of law and halachic judgments in Israel. They spread division, they cause machloket, they destroy the world, they extinguish the light of the Torah that's in the world, and they wreak havoc in the vineyard of the God of hosts. In his wisdom, Shlomo HaMelech said, he alluded to them in the Song of Songs, chapter 2, verse 15, take for us foxes, little foxes, that spoil the vineyards, our vineyards are blooming. He says such a person is a rasha, is arrogant, is a fool. Anybody that simply does not respect the Chachamim, and better yet, dismisses them as such, already has problems. But if he thinks he's smarter than them or he's at the same level of them, he has a report card that's going to arrive in his spiritual mail saying, rasha, arrogant, and stupid. From who? Rambam school. Rambam school. What? This is what it is. This is what it is. So in today's world, you have a lot of ignorant people, and that's the reason why people are not as religious, if you will, or as connected to the Torah as you would like them to, but that's coming from ignorance. I have many people, many people, Baruch HaShem, that grew up religious their whole life, but once they started watching my shurim, they told me, I was religious my whole life, but I only did Teshuva and became really religious when I started watching your lectures. Why? Because the things that I learned and the things that you teach weren't always on the same page. Why? I learned a fluffy type of Judaism, a Judaism that fits my life. You taught me what Moshe Rabbeinu said, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe Rabbeinu, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said directly to us. That's what you taught me. So, a person that was religious their whole life doesn't necessarily mean that he knows the Torah. Better yet, a person that was not religious their whole life surely doesn't know any of this stuff. So as soon as they watch our lectures, they get spiritually invigorated. They wake up with a huge amount of enlightenment in their mind. They realize how much their life is full of lies and upside down. So as far as the deterioration that we've had throughout the generation, it's not necessarily just a rule in the world that Hashem wanted in order to give us a big test, but it's in essence, it's just part of nature of how things are as a result of people's actions. If you give a certain message to one particular person, it may not necessarily arrive the same by the time it gets to the third, fourth, or fifth person. And I'll finish this question with a story by Rav Zilberstein in a sefer called Achat Sha'alti, where he says there was one time a rabbi that came to raise some money for his yeshiva, but he was also a speaker, a good speaker. And he came to a certain community for Shabbat, and he started giving a lecture. Sees he gives a lecture in the morning, everybody likes it, it's fantastic, wow, amazing, can't wait for your next speech later on today. All right. Gets to the second speech, everybody shows up, but no one's really smiling at him, no one's really excited to see him, but everybody has to go to shul sometimes anyway, but everybody's being a little bit cold shoulder. He starts talking, and he sees people start looking at each other. He says, "Is something wrong here?" He continues talking, and he still sees the cold shoulder. He stopped. He stopped in the middle of the speech. And he says, would somebody please like to tell me what I did wrong that everybody's like this? Like, what happened between now and a few hours ago? So the Gabbai of the shul says, no, you know. He says, no, I don't know. He says, you write Sifrei Torah. You describe Sifrei Torah. The rabbi says, yeah, sometimes, sure. It's part of what I do. All of a sudden, the Gabbai looks at him, he goes, see, he's not even lying about it. So the rabbi says, what's the problem with writing Sifrei Torah? He says, come on, tell the truth. You stole the Sifrei Torah from back in Israel and you only came here to hide the Sifrei Torah, trying to make some money out of them. The rabbi's face turned white and he says, what? I stole Sifrei Torah? I came here to hide? When did you ever see me steal anything? What are you talking about? And he says, I know that's what you did. He goes, who told you this? And he points to another guy. Hey, Reuven, tell him. He says, Reuven, you saw me steal Sifrei Torah? He says, no, I didn't see you steal Sifrei Torah, but I saw that you took a book. You took a book that didn't belong to you. Because you saw me take a book that when did you see me take a book that belonged to you? Because I didn't see it. Actually, Shimon over there told me you took a book. So you ask Shimon. He goes, Shimon, you saw me take a book that didn't belong to me? Shimon says, no, I didn't see you take a book that didn't belong to you. I just heard you say something in your shiur, and you didn't mention the source, and I figured, he probably stole that from some book. That's how it all started. Real true story. One guy makes a comment at the speaker saying, he just said a story. He probably stole that from some other big Talmid Chacham, and he's mentioning it. It's not really his story. This guy is faker. One thing he said, by the same day, within a few hours, the last guy thought that he stole Sifrei Torah from Israel. He was stealing millions of dollars. Craziness. This is Yeridat HaDorot. This is Yeridat HaDorot, but also Lashon Hara and so on and so forth. You start with one message, within a few hours it could be something completely different. So, the more a person is glued to the Torah, the more clarity you will have at a emet that is always valid no matter what year, no matter how many people, no matter what's going on. There's a single emet that we have in the Torah, and that's what he'll know. One or two more questions.